The battle at the state level over the issue of abortion rages on, with an increasing number of Democratic attorneys general and local prosecutors pledging not to uphold the pro-life laws of their states. Meanwhile, those on the Republican side are fighting for their pro-life laws, some of which have obstacles to overcome even after the Supreme Court handed down its decision on Dobbs overturning Roe and Casey. And by the way, less than an hour ago, a judge in Mississippi has rejected an attempt by the state's abortion clinic to keep Mississippi's pro-life law from going into effect. That abortion clinic, the state's last, will now have to close by Thursday. Well, joining me now to talk about some of the battles at the state level and what lies ahead in the March for Life is Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. General Marshall, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. It's always good to be with you.
Well, let's start off with your remarks at our event on Sunday, and I appreciate you coming up and being a part of that event at Cornerstone. The battle for life continues because, as you pointed out, overturning Roe v. Wade was not the end game. It was just the beginning.
Absolutely, and particularly on the legal front. What the Supreme Court did was to restore order, and that is that this is an issue that is singularly to be decided by our respective state legislatures. And so we're very blessed in Alabama that we were able to be the first state in the union that, following the Dobbs decision on that Friday, was able to fully protect and empower women and children for 9 months, because we were able to get our injunction removed so that Alabama law was in place. And now me and my colleagues across the country, likewise, in analyzing their own state laws, are deciding those next steps moving forward. It's exciting to hear the news you just said about Mississippi and what's going on there, but I know that I've got colleagues throughout our country that are working to make sure that their states join Alabama as we fight to preserve life.
Now, we've had George Soros-funded prosecutors that have pledged 90, I think, to date, that have said they will not, and these are little islands of blue in red states primarily, saying that they will not enforce pro-life laws. Now, you've been very clear that as Attorney General of Alabama, you have certain authority and you can prosecute those district attorneys that refuse to enforce the law. Is that correct?
Well, we'll absolutely make sure that the law in Alabama is enforced. I mean, when you see prosecutors who swear an oath to protect, defend, and enforce the laws of their respective states, the failure to do so is simply an abdication of their responsibility as a public official. This is not an issue of prosecutorial discretion. Tony, I've been a prosecutor for 20 plus years of my professional life, and never once did I turn away from the enforcement of a law, but instead exercise the discretion given me as a prosecutor to use the resources of my office to make sure that the law was enforced. I mean, we've seen decisions of Soros-backed prosecutors across the country with the escalation of violent crime, and I appreciate the discussion that you're going to have on the show this week about what we're seeing across the country right now. But we're not going to allow prosecutors in Alabama to turn a blind eye to a clear violation of our law. We've made it abundantly clear that we'll step forward and be able to do our jobs, and I expect attorneys general across the country, in hearing these announcements of left-leaning prosecutors, that they'll make sure that they have their laws enforced as well.
I mean, General, isn't that really a part of feeding the lawlessness that we've been seeing sweep across our country in the last 3 years?
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've seen the increase in violent crime. And it's one of the things that I guess we can look at this as a positive when we see cities like San Francisco push back when they see the consequences of left-leaning prosecutors not doing their jobs. I think it is critically important that for the rule of law to be enforced, that every member of the executive branch do their job, and principally prosecutors, because they become gatekeepers of being able to ensure that the will of the people is reflected by their legislatures, end up being enforced. And so this is just one of those examples, along what we've seen going on the last couple of years, where left-leaning prosecutors are simply not willing to do their jobs, and it's their communities that suffer as a result of that.
General Marshall, I got to point this out to show the contrast between, I mean, look, it breaks down to party and ideology. Conservatives who uphold the law, respect the law, and then you've got those on the other side that don't. One of your counterparts in New York Attorney General Letitia James, she actually sent a letter last week to Google demanding that they exclude care pregnancy centers from Google searches. Now, Sunday night, when you joined the Celebrating Life event, you were very clear about how churches now and other concerned citizens need to step up to support these care pregnancy centers and expand our work of meeting the needs of women and children, making life better for them, to help them make right choices. And here you have, one of your colleagues on the other side of the political aisle demanding Google remove these centers from any type of search on Google.
Yeah, Tony, there's so much to peel back from this discussion. Number one, again, it's why we need to be mindful of social media and those that dominate the internet, that they don't become the arbiters of truth, which is what the Attorney General in New York is asking her version of the truth to be the one that's adopted. The reality is she's objecting to pregnancy centers that work with women so they understand their choices, so they understand the options that exist for them in bringing that baby to term. She wants to suffocate that voice, and somehow or another using the censorship ability of social media to be able to advance an agenda that clearly is inconsistent with what we believe ought to be the free sharing of information, but also the ability of the left, again, to be able to dominate the agenda. I think it's just one example of many in the coming weeks and months where Republican attorneys general are going to have to be very proactive in being able to push back, because despite what the clear direction of the court was in Dobbs, there's an agenda in place, and we need to be prepared to push back against that agenda.
Well, and I can say, I think on behalf of pro-life Americans, we're grateful for attorneys general like yourself that are not shying away from this battle. You're rolling up your sleeves and going to work, and we're grateful for it. And I want to thank you again for joining us Sunday night, and I want to thank you for joining us again today. And I know the citizens of Alabama are blessed to have you as their Attorney General.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's a worthy fight, and glad that we get to be a part of it.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us.